Anita Dunn is a senior advisor to President Biden. She told CNN on Sunday that the president has not committed to reopening schools this fall because the pandemic is unpredictable. CNN host Jake Tapper asked, is it the Biden administration's position that all K through 12 schools should be back full-time in-person learning start at the next school year? At the start of the next school year. And Dunn responded, well, he said probably. He didn't say absolutely. But given the science, if the vaccination program in this country proceeds, if people do get their vaccines there, he does believe that schools should be able to reopen in September and reopen safely following the CDC guidelines. But he said probably. He did not say absolutely. Because we have all seen this, unfortunately, since January of 2020. It's an unpredictable virus. Well, there has been some science that schools can open and can open successfully. And a lot of schools have been open since last September successfully. And then there's also some reason to believe that maybe the science has been influenced by the American Federation of Teachers. To talk about this, we have Mark Mix with us, who is president of the National Right to Work Committee, which is a 2.8 million member public policy organization. He also serves as president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Mr. Mix, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Well, Dave, it's good to be on with you, and thanks for talking about this topic. It's an important one for sure.
Yeah, it's obvious that the CDC was influenced by Randi Weingarten and her union. But yet at the same time, we're told to follow the science, and there is some credible science, not only here but from around the world, that in-class instruction has been done successfully and without spreading in a dangerous way the COVID-19. I'm surprised that there aren't parents just taken to the streets on this and demanding that schools open.
Well, Dave, there are actually around the country. Those parents are starting to take things over again. Here in Northern Virginia, we've got a bunch of parents that are protesting and calling on school board members to open the schools. We found a school board district the other day outside was worried about a bunch of parents showing up to a meeting. They left. They called off the meeting. The parents stayed, used Robert's Rules of Orders, threw everyone out. The elected officials elected a new board and opened the schools. So to your point, things are beginning to change. And frankly, this is about power politics, and no one exercises power politics better than union officials here in Washington, D.C. And Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, which is affiliated with the AFL-CIO, she is an operator. She's close to the White House. And it turns out that notwithstanding, quote, the science, as you talked about, Dave, they have been involved in helping, and I'm using my finger quotes here, helping the CDC to write the guidelines for the reopening of the schools. And let's just go back real quickly to what's transpired over the last several months when we talk about the Los Angeles School District, where their demands were defund the police, Medicaid for everybody, radical political agendas that had nothing to do with children, and they weren't going to go back to the classrooms until their demands were met. In Chicago, teacher union officials there basically demanded to be first in line for the vaccines. They got first in line for the vaccines, but yet they won't go back to school. They're threatening job actions. And these demands for, non-educational issues is about power politics. It's not about teachers per se. Most teachers want to be back in the classrooms. They want to help their kids grow and prosper and be educated. But union officials who have monopoly control over a lot of school districts in this country are using this crisis, as Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. They're not letting this crisis go to waste. They're using it to exercise and expand their power over the American workforce and the educational system.
So is it demands other than money? Because I'm thinking, okay, if they were using this crisis to extort more money, mission accomplished. You got billions from the feds on a couple of rounds of stimulus payments. In California, they demanded billions of dollars be spent on new aeration systems and ventilation systems in the school. Gavin Newsom acquiesced on that. Mission accomplished. So what else is there unless it's these other demands that don't have anything to do with classrooms and money that they're holding out for in some of these larger cities?
Yeah, Dave, that's a great example. And the money flowed from that so-called COVID relief bill that literally papers over the mismanagement and the inefficiencies of local governments, local schools. I mean, the promises they've made to a lot of workers with their pensions and their benefits, they're just not going to be fulfilled. But you and I and the taxpayers of America ponied up. Well, I guess we used debt to do it all, but ponied up to paper over all these inefficiencies. And yes, their demands are more about the future and what education will look like in the future than they are about getting the schools reopened again. And we know that because, to your point, the money that was allocated in the so-called COVID relief bill, the $1.9 trillion that's already passed and been distributed, that money was about funding the California schools, specifically California, for like the next 5 years. It had nothing to do with getting it reopened. So to your point, I mean, the demands are a lot more. Specifically, what are they? I'm sure they're different in each state, but I'm sure they're not 100% about getting the schools open again for children.
Well, this is a major issue for parents. It's a major reason why women are not in the workforce, and then kids are falling behind, which is going to affect their future earning ability. But this is different, Mark. In 1981, I think it was, when Ronald Reagan told the air traffic controllers, get back to work or you're fired, and they stayed on strike, and Reagan fired them. That can't really happen this time, can it? Because the air traffic controllers were under more of the control of the federal government, where teachers aren't. I mean, there are, like in Kentucky, there's only one school district that has collective bargaining power, and that's Jefferson County, Louisville. Teachers have collective bargaining agreement power. This is really not something then that let's say, a Republican president or a president that's fed up with the teachers' unions could just say, get back to work or you're fired. They can't really do that on the federal level, can they?
No, that's right. And in fact, when Ronald Reagan did it with the air traffic controllers, there was a law on the books that said federal workers could not go out on strike, and yet they denied that law. And what Reagan did was enforce the law. But you're right. I mean, it's not like President Biden or whoever handles these affairs for him could say, get back to work. It'd have to be a school board president. It'd have to be a governor. It'd have to be a mayor. You know, in Chicago, when Lori Lightfoot was negotiating with the Chicago Teachers Union, I mean, she finally came up and talked tough and said, we're out of runway, but they still made demands. They still threatened to strike. And frankly, I don't think those schools are open completely there either at this point. So the power is dramatic. And this is a display, Dave, to your point, of the monopoly power that union officials have gotten over government and specifically over the educational system.
Well, I would have to think there's a lot of teachers in the rank and file that are ready to go back to work, or maybe tired of this remote learning business. Don't they have any sway over the leadership of the union going, hey, look, I mean, we've held out, we've gotten more money to make some improvements to make the schools safer. Let's get back to work. Don't they have any sway?
Well, I think they do, but you don't hear those voices because when unions get power, when teachers union get power, they become the monopoly voice in that bargaining unit. That means that independent-minded teachers can't go to the school board. They can't go. They can try to elect new leaders to the union, but that's a very difficult proposition. And this power is a result of government-granted privilege to union officials. I mean, it was Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s when they were basically doing the federal labor law that affected private sector workers across the country. He was asked about unionizing government. He said, you can't do that. It's unthinkable we would do that. It's not the same. And what we're finding now, history is telling us that Roosevelt was right. It's not the same. This is a private organization in between elected officials and taxpayers, and there's no place for us in that debate at this point because union officials, like in Louisville and then in many states across the country, they have this power to speak, and their voice is the only voice that gets heard in many cases. So we're representing lots of teachers across the country, some from Chicago, some from San Diego, lots from California, some from Washington State, all over the country that are interested in having a bigger voice, but that voice only comes when union officials' power in the public sector diminishes.
Talking with Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee. Well, the money's doing the talking. The American Federation of Teachers spent $20 million to elect Democrats in the 2020 election cycle. So that kind of money's going to speak loudly. While I have you on the phone, Mark, I have to ask you about the infrastructure bill that President Biden has proposed, which would remove the right to work laws in, I think, 27 states, including Kentucky. You're the president of the National Right to Work Committee. You're the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Your comments, sir.
Well, it's an outright attack, and frankly, it's not surprising. I mean, over the last 10 years, Kentucky included, we passed 5 new right-to-work laws. We've had the Supreme Court rule that forced fees in the government sector is a violation of the First Amendment. So union officials they're upset. We finally got on their radar screen with some pushback, and so it's no surprise to us that Joe Biden, who continually talks about union this and union that, and ignores 94% of private sector workers who have chosen not to join unions for whatever reason, and certainly have the legal right, Dave, to join unions. There's nothing in federal law that stops workers from joining if they want to and having a vote. Nothing. But this is about union power, and as to your point, the AFT, while they spent $20 million reported, we know that that's only the tip of the iceberg of what union officials spend on politics. And in fact, they spend like that because their power is a result of government action. Instead of selling products to workers, either in the private sector or the public sector, they need government to continue their gravy train off the back of workers in this country, and that's why they play politics. And Joe Biden, his rhetoric is one thing, the actions are another. Repealing laws that simply say you have the choice of whether or not you want to financially support a labor union or not. I mean, how does that do anything for workers, Dave? How does giving up all their private information to union officials, their cell phone numbers, their emails, their work shifts, their home addresses, how does that benefit individual workers? I mean, these are questions that have to be asked, and that PRO Act, that legislation, that language is part of the instructions of the infrastructure bill. It has nothing to do with building bridges and roads. It has everything to do with giving union officials more power over more workers.
You might have some recourse, wouldn't you, in terms of the proposal also wants to remove the secret ballot. If a union is being debated in a plant like it was at the Amazon facility down in Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and the union got routed down there, and that was the choice of the workers. But the idea that you would remove a secret ballot, that seems to me to be an inherent American right in this country. Wouldn't you have some recourse there? They want to remove that.
Yeah, you would think, Dave, but unfortunately that can be done by statute. The labor law, common law and labor law are on two paths that never intersect. They're on parallel routes. I mean, for you and I to make a contract, we have to have a meeting of the minds. There has to be consideration. There has to be no duress, and it has to be legal. Under labor law, union officials, if they can get a statute passed, can force you to agree with them no matter what your views are. They can force you to mandate consideration. You can disagree with them, and unfortunately, the fourth element would be that it would be legal because the statute says so. The National Labor Relations Board and the United States Congress can eliminate the secret ballot. In fact, they tried it under the Obama administration. They tried to pass the card check bill. It failed, and we were defending against it, and we have to defend it against it again because the PRO Act would radically change the way unions are certified. It would allow the NLRB to impose a union by card check if there was any hint, and I'm using my finger quotes again, of an unfair labor practice charged by an employer. I mean, labor law is entirely different than regular law, and so your common sense approach, Dave, which I appreciate and respect, doesn't apply when it comes to labor policy in America.
Well, there's a lot of places where common sense doesn't apply anymore, it would seem. Well, back to the school and the teachers and everything else. It's going to be interesting to see what happens because politically, the president needs to declare victory over the virus, and he set this July 4th goal to get a number of shots. So you can't declare victory over the virus, yet still allow public schools to have remote learning and not get kids back in the classroom. So something's going to have to give at some point.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And I'm planning on a barbecue on July 4th, too, no matter what. So
I'm sure I'll go.
And I don't want his permission for that, so hopefully no one's listening that will turn me in. But anyway, I hope a lot of people are listening, actually, and continue to get together. But, yes, he's going to have to at some point, Dave. You're right. And the schools have to be part of that process as well.
Absolutely. Mark Mix, president of the National Work Committee. Mark, very, very thankful you joined us today. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dave.